So our third talking point will be mobile queries, what they look like versus desktop queries. How's that sound?
Great.
So if you're ready, I'm ready. I'll try not to drop the computer again. And we're going to start in 3, 2, 27, 56, 49, 15, 1. This is going on. There we go. Okay.
Well, live.
Live, yeah. So I'm Michael Martinez of SEO Theory, and I have Kent Yunk here with me. Kent's with Roaring Pajamas. Hello, Kent.
Hello.
And this is the November 6th, 2015 SEO Theory Hangout. I keep renaming them. Some weeks it's a chat, other weeks it's a hangout. Apparently putting the word hangout in the name gets better response from the viewers. So we're going to try and go with hangout for a while. And it's only the SEO Theory Hangout because we're publishing these videos on the SEO Theory channel. This was all Kent's idea.
I'll take the blame if it's bad.
It's not bad. It's not bad. People are watching the videos, and I just we have to continue building up the viewership. I used to do a lot more videos than I do now, and I guess people just got tired of waiting for me to do new videos. So we're building new audience. Very exciting stuff.
Yes, very exciting.
Marketing on the internet. It's what we do. So,
should we share with our audience that we're bi-coastal? So we're literally, you're on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast.
I don't want to get into coastism if we don't have to. The caustic relationship between two videographers is, anybody who doesn't speak English as a first language probably doesn't get any of that. So Kent is on the West Coast, and I'm close to the East Coast. I used to be on the West Coast. Kent and I used to work together in California. So we've covered that, right?
Yes, it is covered.
Watching my watch, because if there's one thing Google won't tell you, it's how long you've been on the air. And we're trying to keep these to like 30 minutes or so. So Kent came up with a couple of talking points, and I came up with a talking point. First of all, Kent wanted to talk about Google RankBrain. And if you subscribe to the SEO Theory newsletter, then you know what I have to say about Google RankBrain. Kent subscribes to the SEO Theory newsletter, so he knows. Then he also wanted to talk a little bit about internal URLs. And I thought, well, that's actually an opportunity to talk about some canonicalization issues that have come up. And there was, what was that third point I wanted to talk about?
Mobile queries and what they look like.
Mobile queries versus desktop queries. And so, well, let's get started on RankBrain. What do you know about RankBrain?
Well, I think there's a lot of buzz right now about RankBrain and what it means in terms of providing a better, or maybe not even a better, search experience, because they're trying to add. I think Google's really trying to add ammunition to its ability to find and position content in a way that makes sense. But I'm not a technical theorist like yourself, and I certainly am not as up on how algorithmic patterns work and how they're developed. So I was hoping that you could share some of your sort of broader knowledge about what you think RankBrain is and how Google plans to use that, or at the very least, implement it in a way that allows for a better experience on the part of the users.
Okay, well, let me say first that being a theorist doesn't mean you actually know anything. It just means you come up with explanations for things, So I shared I was reading a bunch of theorist jokes on the internet last week, and I shared one in the newsletter. This I altered it. The original is pretty funny if you're into physics and things like that. This experimentalist comes into this theorist office. Says, look at this chart. Look at these numbers. It's terrible. theorist goes, I would expect to see exactly that. Here's why. He starts to explain this long, detailed, complicated stuff, and then the experimentalist grabs the chart and goes, I'm sorry, I had it upside down. Look at that. And the theorist goes, you know what? I would expect to see exactly that. Here's why. So I just, I love theorist jokes. Theorists and experimentalists have a long history of being experimentalists and theorists. So, do I have any real insight into the way Google's learning algorithms work, other than what I've said on the web? I have I've done fuzzy logic as a programmer. Fuzzy logic is like the step before learning algorithms. Fuzzy logic is where you, the programmer, come up with all the rules yourself. And so your program goes, well, does this rule apply, or does this rule apply, or does this rule apply? And goes through all these rules and figures out if it wants to do a certain thing to whatever data it's processing or not. And that's fuzzy logic. In learning algorithms, we're trying to take the burden off the programmer of finding out what the rules are that should apply to the data and determine when you want to do a certain process to the data or not. That's basically what learning algorithms are trying to do. And the way learning algorithms do that is they go through the data and they try something. And then they go through the data and they try something again. And somewhere along the way, you have this learning set that shows it what it's trying to do. And it keeps comparing its little experiments to the learning set. And eventually it just comes up with the best that it can do. And you go from there. That's more or less learning algorithm, 20 years of learning algorithm science in like 2 seconds. So any learning algorithm specialists who are watching this are falling out of their chairs right now, laughing their heads off, because that's an oversimplification. But we can talk a little bit about RankBrain, because I watched the Bloomberg video last week, and with Google's head learning algorithm guy, Greg Corrado, not sure how to pronounce it. And he mentioned that they were using vectors. And so I knew immediately that a lot of people in the marketing field were not going to get what vectors are. And vectors are really arrays. Vectors are just, you take something and you put it into a line and you slice up the line, and then each segment of the line is an element in the array. And you can associate things with each element in the array. You sort of like create an array for each element, and it can get more complicated than that. So what I did was I took Greg's name and I searched for his research, and I found some research papers that he and his team had published that had been cited hundreds and hundreds of times by other researchers across the world. And they've come up with some really interesting breakthroughs in semantic technology, semantic algorithm development. And based on what they were sharing through their academic research, I guess you could say, I was able to deduce the basic process that they more than likely incorporated into RankBrain. And so I explained how vectors work, and then I tried to relate that to what I found in the papers. Doing that in a 30-minute video without all the little funky, special effects that professional videographers would use. That's kind of hard to do. But you with me so far?
I am. I think it's fascinating that they developed this, but I am curious how they're going to apply it.
Well, we could look at a parking lot. Okay, so you drive to the local shopping center, and you go into the parking lot, and you've never been in the shopping center before. You look at all the rows of cars, and you see where more cars are parked and where fewer cars are parked. And you're going to think a couple of things. Where the cars are, you're going to think that's safer because there are more people there. Where there are fewer cars, you're going to think that's not so safe. But, how close are you going to be able to park to an entrance to the mall? And so you tend to park where everybody else is parking. But over time, as you keep going back to the mall, you find out that if you park around the side near one of the anchor stores like Sears or Macy's or whatever, you can actually walk into the mall through that store. You can park right outside the doors. I mean, that basically is a human applied learning algorithm. And that is basically what they're doing with with the vectors for semantic research. So they collect all these queries. What, 3 billion a day? Is that what the number is right now?
Something.
And so about 15% of those queries, the system has never seen before. That doesn't necessarily mean that nobody's ever used those queries before, but we're just going to say that those queries are not in the system. So they collect this 15% of queries and they put them in what we'll call a database. With Google, it's probably not as simple as a database anymore. But so they put these queries, these 15% of queries, into a database. Let's say they do that for a month, 90 days of queries, and so uh, let's say over 30 billion queries. So these queries have never been seen by the system before. What's the system supposed to do with these queries? And what they do is they take all the queries and they group them into certain categories based on the words they use. And then they measure the distance between words at the beginning of the query and words at the end of the query. And they're probably looking at nouns and pronouns and maybe verbs more than they're looking at adjectives and adverbs and articles. They're probably not looking at conjunctions that much. So let's assume for the sake of discussion that they're looking at nouns and pronouns and verbs. And so they want to look at the relationships between these words and other words so that they can kind of create a normalized list of the expressions that are used most often. And so to look at these relationships, they put each word in a phrase into an element in an array. And then they start doing measurements between element one and element two, element one and element three, element one and element four, element two and element three, so on and so forth, like that. And they record these measurements. And once they have like millions and billions of these measurements done, they start to look at I'm not going to say they're going to use regression analysis, but they start to look for a statistical compatibility between variations on the terms. And this teaches them basically to associate certain words with certain phrases. Once they have the core phrases, then they can treat the rest of that stuff as kind of qualifiers for phrases. Now, Bill Slosky found a Google patent that kind of talks about what they would do once they have some basic phrases and some words that they can add to those phrases. And he thinks that that might be part of what the RankBrain process is doing. And I mentioned to him in a comment on his company blog that I thought that might be a second stage process. I didn't go into why I thought that might be a second stage process. But first, you have to get the data into a manageable form so that you can do these experimental associations. John Andrews, who is a longtime SEO, I don't know if you know John or not, but he's got an engineering background. He publishes his own private newsletter. It's a free newsletter. He kind of just rants and rambles on about stuff that old timer guys like me like. At any rate, he was going on about how a lot of the people in the marketing industry don't really understand math, and it's they're making a big fuss over the vectors and all this stuff. And he made an interesting comment that got me to thinking. He said they're probably recording the search results for all the queries they know. And with RankBrain, they're coming up with a query and they're trying to find something that's similar to it so they can just show you those search results until they can take it offline and figure out what a better solution is. And this probably explains why query search results change over time. It's purely hypothetical, but I think it's a great hypothesis and I really like it. And that would kind of fit with what RankBrain seems to be doing. So over to you, Kent.
Well, I think that's really interesting in that I get a sense for the methodology. And I get a sense for why they want the learning algorithms to work. Did you see in the data that they were talking about that they were only applying the learning algorithm to new queries, stuff that had never been seen, or are they applying it to the old stuff as well?
They told Bloomberg it's only new queries that they're doing this for. Which, if John Andrews is right, then they only need to do it for for new queries, because they're computing results for the old queries that are already in the database. They just don't know what to do with the new queries.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, including me, have complained that Google's search results really suck. And this would kind of explain why they suck, because when you're processing 3 billion queries a day, how much time can you afford to take to go find the best answer? All you need is a satisfactory answer. And if I were working with the Google engineering team, I cannot imagine that I would be able to come up with anything much better than what they're doing, because it's a volume based problem. The, the expert searcher is going to get screwed every time by a volume based algorithm. So that's where
Mm-hmm. Wow. So it benefits us still to go 2 or 3 pages in to find a better answer, even with the
or to change the query. And in fact, some of their learning algorithms look at the queries that have been changed. So they're not just looking at individual queries. If you go in and you type in rubber baby buggy bumpers and you don't like what you see, and you immediately change the query to rubber baby buggy bumpers, uh, the phrase, you don't like what you see, and then you change it to rubber baby buggy bumpers, the tongue twister, and then you like what you see, um, they're going to learn from that. They're going to go,
Mhm.
this isn't one query by itself. This is a set of queries. And they know that because A, you're either not clicking on the stuff that you see in the first query, or you have what people are calling short clicks. And B, it's happening in a short time frame. And so the web marketing industry, you can see them talking about short clicks and long clicks and all this nonsense all the time. And they really
Mhm.
don't understand that that kind of stuff is not very useful for determining rankings, but it is useful for understanding what the purpose of a query is. Because if the first query isn't getting the user what they want, the second query is, and Google is saying, if you're going through 10 queries, we're going to try and save you time and get you from query 1 to query 10 as soon as we can.
Right.
And that's what all the click analysis is really trying to do. Well, that's not all of it, but that's a large part of what the click analysis is trying to do. So,
That makes sense. It does.
so let's talk
Um,
about internal URLs.
yes. So one of the challenges that I'm finding with clients that build parallax sites is that they build these parallax sites and they often ignore any kind of internal linking structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when they build the site as a sort of standalone one-page site that uses a bunch of hashtag virtual pages. Um, Often there's no good connection to any of the other content, um, because they're building these as segments of an existing page. So and they lose all that value because, frankly, when a site gets crawled, Google looks at those internal links and says, look, we need to make sure that that the pages that are close to the homepage are super relevant for what the company is about, and stuff that's further away, is there a logical link to that, and how can you drive authority to those pages through you know um, those pages that are closer to the homepage. So in some ways it's sort of looking at the cascading of value from highly relevant, really important pages to, yeah, they're important pages, but they're less relevant farther away from the homepage in some ways. And that's not necessarily true. So you have to find a way to make sure that that linking structure supports the value of these pages that are, virtually farther away from the homepage.
Yeah, one of the problems I've always had with web marketing thinking is that the homepage is somehow more important than the rest of the website. The homepage is just the first card in the deck,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be the ace of spades or it could be the two of diamonds. It doesn't matter. It's just another card in the deck, and people need to think 3 dimensionally about this. Somebody can come into your website from any direction through those links. And if there's nothing to link to, then yeah, they're all going to try and come in through the front door, but you're just not going to get as much visibility, either in your own website content or elsewhere.
Agreed. So I just wanted to, in terms of importance, I think it's every bit as important to build good internal linking as it is to build external links, right? So finding and acquiring external links which drive authority to your site, I think creating internal links is just as important, if not more so, because it really does create the sense from a search engine standpoint of a cohesive document that is logically connected with relevant pieces of information that all support one another, right?
Right.
I will often use the analogy of a textbook, where in the textbook there is a bibliographical reference to another keyword or reference to another section of that same text that helps drive importance for that additional piece of text.
And that actually that touches on something that I mentioned in the newsletter this week, which is about publication URLs. People don't understand that where you publish your content is not necessarily where someone else is going to find it. And the myth of the web URL is a very complicated story. So you can take you can take an article and you can publish it on a WordPress blog. By default, it's going to be $P equals post ID, some number, and you can go in and change that to a pretty URL so that it says like your site slash category name slash article name or something like that. You can put dates in it. You can put all sorts of stuff into the pretty URL. You're actually publishing that content on every possible URL. You're just telling the blog to only respond to certain URL structures. And there was a question on Quora where somebody's got this e-commerce website and they embedded a WordPress blog in a /blog folder. Mm-hmm. And Google's it's crawling the blog, but it's not indexing any of the pages from the blog. And the reason is that they're doing 301 redirects from the $P equals ID format to the pretty URL. But the pretty URL is published with a canonical, rel equals canonical directive back to the P equals 30, P equals post ID. So Google is going, where do you want me to go? I can't index something that you keep telling me to redirect. The canonical tag has been abused, in my opinion, by the SEO industry. And Moz got into a problem with their attempts to canonicalize their user-generated content to their /blog side, because they'll promote content from UGC up to the /blog. And Google will show the blog, will show the UGC categories in its search results, not the blog categories that Moz thinks is more important. And I don't know if they're using URL rewriting or if they're actually publishing articles in the same, 2 different locations in their database. Obviously, it's database driven, but they're creating duplicate content. And they're thinking, well, if we just canonicalize the content to over here, Google's going to take that. But Google is seeing the content here first. And it's not where the article shows up, it's where the category, which category shows up. And so Google keeps seeing that the UGC categories are more productive than the /blog categories. /blog categories reduce duplicate content. They're not as important as the UGC categories. And so John Mueller, told them on the Google forums, you guys need to differentiate these things a little bit better. And this is something I have seen before. When we were at Quinn Street, for example, they had bought internet.com. And you remember all those websites, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And so they had all these B2B websites that were just doing really bizarre stuff. The secondary sites were all driving traffic to internet.com, which was nothing more than a page filled with links back to the secondary sites. And there was no real value in internet.com. It was an aggregator, but it was the flagship, the brand site, and so that was one problem they had. Another problem they had was they would publish an article in a container folder and then replicate it in several others. They were, instead of putting like tags on these articles and saying, here's a tag page that kind of links to an excerpt to this article and a bunch of other related articles, they were just republishing the same articles in like 4 or 5 containers. And it was duplicate content. They couldn't even canonicalize it because of the way that their CMS was working. And so I worked with the development team a little bit to help them figure out that they had to pick one container that was going to be the authoritative container, and all the other stuff was just going to have to be dropped out of the index, or some other way given less importance.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't too surprised when I saw that Moz was having trouble, because they're not the first people to run into this. But it's the, the situation did not go without a few comments from old timers in the industry. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that, and that's the important thing, is that sometimes the devil's in the details, right? Making the assumption that your canonical feature is working properly and it's pointing to the page that you want it to point to is a bad assumption. You should always check it, always test it. And there's tons of tools and apps that you can run in your browser that'll help you see, or at least visualize, some of that canonicalization, or if it's put in place in the wrong place, or it's pointing to the wrong page. Super easy to find this stuff, but again, it's devil in the details, right? Not everybody's looking at that.
Yeah, my preference on sites that I designed from the ground up is to publish the content in one place and then index it in as many categories or tags or whatever you want to call them as you want. You just link to the one place, and so I give a distinctive quality to each indexing page by having an index a different mix of things, so that I'm not duplicating excerpts from index page to index page to index page. You can do that on WordPress. It's not easy, but you can do that on WordPress. It's, in my opinion, a much smarter way of doing things, because then you don't have to worry about redirects, you don't have to worry about canonicals, and if you don't like which folder or container or index page is showing up in the search results, then you can adjust what you're putting on that page and get something else to show up there. It's much easier to do that way, and I've been doing that going back to the 90s. I mean, that's old school, baby. Old school. So.
You also, before, I know we're running low on time, you also wanted to talk about mobile URLs versus desktop URLs?
Not mobile URLs, but mobile queries. So what is the difference between a mobile query and a desktop query? Right now, we're in a very unique position in terms of data, because mobile queries have only been around for a few years. Desktop queries have been around for over a decade. And so all you have to do is go over to Google Trends and type in some queries. And if you see a query that just kind of does this over the years, that's a desktop query. If you see a query that does this, that's a mobile query. It didn't exist prior to 2 or 3 years ago. And if it's shooting up like that, that's because a lot of people are starting to use it. And there are certain expressions that I'm not going to share on the video. I'll share them with you privately, that qualify these queries. Some of these queries, not all of them. But a few weeks back, everybody was going, oh, mobile is overtaking desktop. It's like 20 billion mobile queries to 17 billion desktop queries. Well, just 3 years ago, there were 20 billion desktop queries, period, or 20 billion queries. So mobile queries are not taking anything away from the desktop. They're taking very little away from the desktop. The desktop query environment is still very much alive and well. The mobile query environment is almost entirely new queries. or it's the same desktop queries in some cases, just not, people are not substituting their smartphones for the desktops. We're using our smartphones differently from the way we use our desktops. So
Mhm.
desktop search is going to be around for a long time. It's very healthy. It's very robust. It's huge. I wish it were growing, but it's not. It has declined 15% over the last 3 years, but that's not so bad. Mobile search is just exploding. And so when you look at the query data, if you go into like Search Console, and you grab those queries and you start typing them into the trends tool, you will see this for all the mobile queries because people weren't doing those queries a few years ago. That is the kind of advanced SEO that I like.
Well, stuff that has sort of radical hockey stick feedback.
Just it's been a long time since I've seen query trends like that. A very long time.
Mm-hmm. Neat.
Well, I guess we've covered our 3 points. We're at about 30 minutes, maybe a little longer. So it's been a good chat. Hangout. I don't know exactly what we're going to call it, but this week it's a hangout. The SEO Theory number 6 hangout. Kent Yunk is vice president of Roaring Pajamas SEO. He and I have worked together in the past, and we're friends. And I still haven't uploaded the hour of footage that we recorded in 2012. I'll get around to it eventually. I keep saying that. Been saying that for years, but it's all good stuff. And so, hopefully, we can get on a weekly basis with this.